Now, the Philippines' highest army general, Romeo Brawner, told First Post Media in India that his country suffers bullying from China in their exclusive economic zone every day. We're showing here the latest statements reacting to China from the Philippine Defense Secretary. Now, Brawner goes on to say this.
With Iran, we're seeing that most of the conflict is really fought by missile systems. Yeah. And so we need to expand the integrated missile and air defenses of the Philippines. Right. And again, the BrahMos missile system plays a very important role in this endeavor.
Professor Liu, so we know that Philippines wants to order more BrahMos from India. Why is that partnership, particularly with India, very important to the Philippines, but also to this region?
Yes, for Philippines, this is very important because in the past, the Philippines was a kind of defenseless because the Chinese can easily pose the threat to Philippines. But nowadays, Philippines has equipped with these supersonic anti-ship missiles. So in that case, they put that in the western part of the Luzon. So in that case, they can take care of the possible threat from the South China Sea, of course, China.
The latest news is that Indonesia has just finalized its order of BrahMos 2 from India. We know that Vietnam is in negotiations. You know, what is the common threat?
The common threat is China. China is being aggressive in the so-called South China Sea. I like to call it the Southeast Asian Sea. And it's trying to take over that region. And Indonesia has part of that South Sea area, and they feel threatened by it. And in fact, the Indonesia is making a massive investment in its defense. It's buying Rafales from France. It's buying fighter jets from Turkey, MQ-9s from the US, submarines from the French. They are understanding that China's expansion is not going to stop at Taiwan.
And so this is all to protect the Natuna Islands?
Natuna Islands and also the channels that go through Indonesia. Indonesia is a large archipelago. And so there are channels that ships go through. And so it's not just the Natuna, it's all their channels that shipping would go through, commercial shipping goes through. They need to protect that. And they need to protect it from also illegal shipping, smugglers and terrorists, who knows what. And the point is that China is expanding its influence, and the nations of the Southeast Asia are not liking it.
Professor Liu, returning to the first island chain, this concept of a missile arc, how would you say that it aligns with the Trump administration's national security strategy and national defense strategy?
Yes. This administration has emphasized there's need for allies to upgrade their military capabilities. This is very important. So that is why, in particular, I asked Japan to serve a sort of strategic OEM to help the U.S. and allies to defend the threat from China, possibly North China primarily. So in that case, that will allow the United States to have time to come to this region, because it's the other side of Pacific Ocean. You know what happened in Iran. It's not just 1 day, 2 days. It could be several days. In that case, this kind of weapon stockpiles are very important. That is why the U.S. encouraged Taiwan, Philippines, Japan to upgrade their military capabilities.
Okay, Gimon, I'm going to quote to you from the National Defense Strategy. It says, "We will erect a strong denial defense along the first island chain. We also urge and enable key regional allies, as Professor said, and partners to do more for our collective defense." But isn't it true that it's not just the US sort of leading and coordinate? I mean, the individual countries are taking a lot of agency in this, and particularly Japan.
Right. Japan used to invest 1% of its GDP in defense, and then it went to 2%, and now with a new prime minister, it's probably going to go much higher. When you have an alliance, the alliance means that all countries together are going to work together. NATO, during the Cold War, invested a lot of money into their defenses. But after the Cold War ended, a lot of the European countries kind of lost their vision about what their defense is. And now they're paying for it by being unable to help Ukraine. And so what the idea behind these alliances is basically there should be at least one country in each of these alliances that is strong and can defend itself, and then have, as the professor said, enough time for the U.S. to show up, because the U.S. can't be everywhere at the same time in all around the world. And so in Europe, Germany is stepping up, Poland is stepping up, a lot of countries, most countries are stepping up to the 5% GDP. And so the expectation is that in Asia, these countries also need to step up and be prepared. And this, again, stops aggression, either from Russia or from China.
Okay, and Professor, to what extent the Japan Times headlines this as a division of labor, for defending the first island chain. How far do you believe that these developments are actually coordinated?
Yeah, it's always under U.S. leadership, but in the past, that's a spoke and hub strategy. So that means this is between U.S. and the other countries bilaterally. But now this time it's kind of a coordinated, systemic coordination against the possible threats from possible China, North Korea, Russia. They are all relevant. Because, just last year, China and Russia referenced the UN Charter enemy clause, all right? In that case, it's targeting Japan, all right? So this is unusual, never happened in the past. So that means the other side, China and Russia, they also might have this kind of coordinated invasion against the first island chain. So that is why it's very important for Japan to have a bigger role to be able to help the allies of the United States and wait for the U.S.'s the coming as soon as possible. Yeah.
And again, how to what extent then does this kind of architecture, make Xi Jinping rethink that invasion scenario?
Well, just as he's trying to get his forces into a joint role, the U.S. is working to get these countries into a combined role. And combined military operations require common operating pictures, common doctrine, common procedures, etc. And luckily, the countries that we're talking about all are under the major non-NATO allies. And so these countries in Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific, are getting themselves in line with each other so that they can work together in case there is actual conflict.
I want to go back to the figure of 1,000 that you said. You said that we should concentrate on the launchers, as we know from Iran, and not the missiles.
Right.
But even so, that outnumbers what the launchers of the U.S. and its allies.
But again, just because they launch a missile doesn't mean the target is destroyed. They might need to retarget. And unfortunately, China is learning a lot of lessons from this war because they're providing intelligence to Iran to do missile strikes. A lot of the technology came from North Korea and China. And so, there's a lot of push and pull in war. And you can't also forget that the U.S., in this case, provided additional interceptors to the region. So you have THAAD, you have Patriot, you have Aegis, you have SM-2, SM-3, SM-6s. So all these things are additive and make the threat less against that China presents. The idea would be that the U.S. would be in position before China struck, and that way the threat of China becomes even more diminished.
Right, yeah. Obviously, to have the missiles and the launchers is better than not having any at all.
Right.